Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we're going to go through the second game in the series of Bobby Fischer's road to the World Championship. And in this game he's playing a Russian grandmaster called Vasily Smyslov. You may have heard of him. This is played again in the Palma de Mallorca Interzonal in the year 1970. This game Fischer was playing with the black pieces and Smyslov had the white pieces. And I've done some sort of FIFA cards at the side, have you seen? So that's just sort of my opinion on how sort of rated these players were at the time. But let's get straight into the game. So Smyslov played the English c4. Fischer played g6. Then there was knight to c3, bishop g7, g3. And we get into a symmetrical English. So after c5, bishop g2 and knight c6. We see that basically it's like a copycat. Both sides have fianchettoed their bishops and they're raking down the board. And Smyslov decides to fianchetto his other bishop with b3 to contest blacks. Fischer now plays e6. It was bishop to b2, knight g to e7. And now Smyslov actually wanted to trade bishops straight away. So he played knight to a4. The knight attacks the pawn on c5 and the bishop on b2 attacks Fischer's bishop on g7, but at the same time the knight also protects white's bishop. So basically it forces black to trade here. So the bishop takes b2 and knight takes b2. I'm not really sure about this for white because this knight on b2 looks really awkward, and it's going to take a while for it to get back into the game. I mean, it can't jump into c4 because the pawn's there, and if he goes to a4, as you say, knights on the rim are dim. And if d3 as well, knight to d3 is just blocking in this pawn. So I don't know about this this knight here. It looks a bit awkward to me. But Fischer just continues his rapid development. So he just castles kingside, and already he's got the two knights out, and his king is safely castled. Smyslov plays e3, probably preparing the move d4, and also preparing knight to e2. But Fischer just gets on again with his development, contests the centre now with this d5 move. Smyslov actually captures this pawn, and I think Fischer now comes up with a really underrated move. He plays knight takes d5. And I think this is underrated because I think how many of us would actually play e takes d5 here? Because after e takes, this is more logical. We get the bishop out, and we've got the centre. However, maybe Fischer thought these pawns are quite weak. I guess white will continue knight to e2 in this position, maybe after bishop to f5, rook c1. Already white's sort of getting tempos against these two pawns. Queen d6 defends, of course, and castles is just another game. But maybe Fischer just didn't like this position. So he actually played knight takes d5. The point being is after knight to e2, Fischer just wanted to put his bishop on a better square. He played b6. The point being is now Fischer wants to put his bishop onto b7, or to this a6 diagonal. And you have to say that's probably a much better place for it. So already you can see Fischer's positional understanding. But maybe Smyslov should have castled here. Instead he actually played d4. And the king isn't actually safely castled yet, so Fischer takes full advantage of this, as we'll see. So first off he plays bishop to a6. And if castle's here, Fischer could actually take on d4. And after pawn takes d4, play bishop takes knight, queen takes, and now black can simply pick up the pawn on d4. The best move actually is to play queen f6 first and attack it twice, and there's no way to defend this pawn, and white's just losing. So white's actually in a lot of trouble already. Smyslov played d takes c5. And again, many players may have just recaptured this pawn, but Fischer's got a really good initiative now. He plays queen to f6, giving the white no respite, attacking the knight on b2, which jumps in knight to c4. And again, maybe a normal player here would play captures or maybe play a rook move here, rook to the open file, but not Fischer. He continues his initiative and just stops white from castling and giving him any room to do so. Plays knight to c3, hits the queen, forces white to make another move. If queen to c2, then knight takes e2 will be good, because now the queen's attacking the rook on a1, a discovered attack. And things get a bit complicated. First, let's look at this variation with king takes e2. If king takes e2, black can play knight to b4, hit the queen. After queen to e4, black can simply play rook to d8. And if white goes pawn grabbing here, they're in a lot of trouble, because then bishop takes c4 comes crashing in. And once the queen takes, Fischer would have had queen to b2 with check, and will pick up the rook if the king moves to the first rank. So with king to f3, now just knight to d3. And everything becomes clear, because the queen's going to take on f2, and also this knight's threatening to play knight to e5 with check, and we'll pick up the queen in a fork. So going back to this move after knight to c3, again if queen to c2, Fischer can play knight takes e2, and if there's a different move here, like let's say bishop takes knight on c6, black could have played knight takes g3, and the knight on g3 is attacking the rook, the queen's also attacking the rook on a1, and white's also attacking black's rook, but that's inconsequential. For instance, if the play continued with pawn takes the knight, just queen takes a1 is very good for black with check. And after king to e2, black gains an endgame advantage with the move queen to e5. The knight, of course, is pinned by the bishop on a6. And if white continues with taking the exchange back, rook takes, pawn takes, pawn takes, we get into this endgame position where it's fair to say that maybe black has the advantage, because the bishop is attacking and pinning this knight, and all it takes is one of these rooks or this queen to swing over to cause white some real issues. So obviously not completely winning, but black definitely has the advantage in this endgame. And after knight c3, I have no question that Fischer probably saw all these variations as well. However, in the game, Smyslov actually just took this knight off. Knight takes c3. Fischer took, queen takes c3 with check. And now the king is just forced to move. If the queen blocks this, of course there's queen takes the rook. So forcing white to play king to f1. And now Fischer played rook to d8, attacking the queen once again. And then there was queen to c1. And Fischer just takes the knight finally. Bishop takes c4. B takes c4, doubling white's pawns. And now queen to d3 with check. King to g1. And of course the bishop is attacking the knight on c6. So Fischer defends and unpins their rook with rook a to c8. And also eyes up and x-rays this queen. So pawn takes is played by Smyslov and Fischer recaptures. So now the smoke has cleared somewhat. And actually white emerges a full pawn up. But you have to say that black's pieces are far better here and far superior. This rook for white is terrible. This rook is undeveloped, and the king's actually blocking this rook in. And all it takes is this knight to move, and black will win back this c-pawn with ease. So in the game, Smyslov continued with queen to b2 to hit the pawn on b6. And now Fischer played knight to a5. A bit of a tricky move, because if queen takes b6, Fischer can play knight takes c4. Queen b1 is given as the best move, and then just queen c3. And again, black's got a far superior position, with moves like knight to a3 coming in, followed by maybe rook to d2 or d1 in certain positions. But yeah, we can all easily play with black's pieces here, much better position. So after knight to a5, Smyslov played h4, giving his king a bit of room to manoeuvre and get this rook out. Makes a lot of sense, but now comes Fischer. Knight takes c4, hits the queen. Smyslov moves his queen to f6, and now Fischer actually offers a trade of queens with queen f5. Smyslov accepts, Fischer recaptures, and now h5, but rook d2 from Fischer, and he's got the advantage. In the endgame, it's best to get your rook on your opponent's 7th or 2nd rank and just cause havoc. So if Fischer can get another rook to, let's say, c2, he's doing very well. So rook c1, this is the reason why Smyslov played that, to stop any rook c2 ideas. But now rook c5. The pawn protects the rook, allows the knight to move away next move. Rook h4. So Smyslov's doing actually playing some good moves. Two rooks now attacking this knight. So Fischer just unpins it though, knight to e5, and now there's a trade of rooks. The rook's attacking a2, so Smyslov defends with rook a4, and now Fischer's actually got a really fast pass pawn though with c4, and this is coming up the board fast, and this knight's also covering this key square to stop the rook getting in behind it. Smyslov does play a tricky move, h6, because it threatens checkmate with rook to a1, checkmate in 2. So this pawn's covering this square. So Fischer plays king f8, gets out of that. There's a check anyway, king e7. So rook gets behind the pawn, but now Fischer just wins another pawn. The pawn on the a file, rook takes a2. Bishop f1. So 2 pieces attacking Fischer's pawn. Fischer defends. Smyslov plays king to g2, but now comes in a devastating move, knight to g4. The 2 pieces are attacking f2, and also Fischer's threatening to play knight takes e3, also threatening this pawn on h6. He's threatening to take on e3 because the pawn on f2 is pinned by the rook. So for instance, if rook takes c4 in this position, knight takes e3 check just wins the game. So for this reason, white played king to g1. Fischer just takes on f2, wins a free pawn. Smyslov wins the c4 pawn, but now Fischer's just going to pick up all these isolated pawns. Rook f3 hits this pawn, and of course this knight's still picking up this pawn on h6. King g2 is played, there's rook takes e3, rook h8, knight takes the pawn, rook takes, and then there's knight g4. Bishop to b5 and rook to b3, hitting the bishop, which goes to c6, rook b2, king to g1, and Fischer just consolidates his position, and basically this should be an easy one endgame. So after rook to b8, bishop h1, this is where the game in the olden days is usually adjourned, so both players, I think Fischer would have had to seal his move into an envelope, and they will continue the game the next day because it's been going on for so long. However, apparently Smyslov here just said, I resign the game, which is fair enough. Someone on the Chess Games website actually said Smyslov probably wanted a bite to eat and just couldn't be bothered trying to continue this game, to be honest. So why did he not continue? Well, Fischer's got 3 pawns here, and white's just got 1. So Fischer's 2 pawns up, and this should be an easy 1 position for black. I think even a player like myself will probably win this endgame, because all Fischer's got to do is get rid of this g-pawn, and these 3 pawns here are just going to go easily marching up the board. It'll take some time, of course, but eventually black should easily win this. So probably Smyslov just didn't want to sit there and have to suffer through a lost position, which could take some time. So anyway, yeah, Fischer won this game, and after round 2, he was actually on 1.5 points out of 2. And Smyslov was a very good player, so to beat him and have a good score already is actually quite a good result for Fischer. However, there are still many good grandmasters yet to come for Fischer, so we'll check out the round 3 in another video very soon. Anyway, thank you all for watching.